Vivek, can I come to you first? And are you in your lab again? We met last week when you were in your lab. I
am in my lab at the University of Manchester.
Very nice, very nice.
Hello.
Vivek, over to you.
Hi. Spaceblue is a startup from the Graphene Engineering and Innovation Center at the University of Manchester. I am the CEO of Spaceblue Limited. I am also an impact fellow at the University of Manchester. Spaceblue is a sustainable circular waste tire recycling platform technology using waste tire. This is the first product we made using waste tire and graphene. One of the biggest challenges when you recycle any material is performance drop. And using the 2D material graphene, now we can optimize the performance of recycled materials. I mean, when I see a waste, I see feedstock. Generally, when you recycle anything, it's gone down in value. But now with using graphene, we can get high performance materials using graphene. And one thing I want to point out is when it comes to zero emissions, let's say an example in automotive, there is two things. One is fuel, which goes to like carbon dioxide emission. Second is indirect waste, is the waste generated by the car, especially waste tire. Most of the waste tires are being burned and it creates a lot of waste. And one thing I noticed in the UK is there is hardly anything being done on the waste recycling. And that is what we are trying to do with Manchester University Graphene Center and Spaceblue. Thank you.
Brilliant. Vivek, I'm sorry, this should come under questions, but I know everybody wants to know. Can you explain the faces behind you?
Oh, of course, yeah. I am based in a research center. I mean, one thing I want to point out is, like before I explain the face very quickly, certain industry entry barriers are going down, like in e-commerce, but when it comes to advanced manufacturing, entry barriers are going higher. That's why innovation centers play a key role. These faces are multifunctional materials. An example, traditionally you make one material for one application. Now we can make a material for an example. This is a composite material, but it has sensors. Some of them can see, some of them can hear. So these are examples of multifunctional materials.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vivek. Mind blown officially by that. Chris, can I come to you? Christopher Taylor at Manchester Met Business School. Yeah, 2 to 3 minutes. Give us some thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So I work at Manchester Met Business School. I've got a kind of broad interest in SME innovation. We're in a situation where about 50% of the region's SMEs aren't innovating, so it's a huge challenge for the economy, particularly with SMEs driving growth. But for the past 3 years, I've been managing a project which has been focusing on hydrogen fuel cell technology. So it's that hydrogen word again, Steve. So we've been supporting SMEs across Greater Manchester to iterate new products and services in relation to hydrogen fuel cell technology. And a key aspect of that being that, innovation is about finding opportunities and problems that need solving. So, hydrogen gets mentioned a lot these days. It's certainly not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve every problem that's out there, but there are issues around there at the minute from a low carbon clean air perspective where hydrogen's got a role to play, as with fuel cell technology. So we've been working with businesses to help them identify those opportunities and to give them some support both from the business school and technically from the faculty of science and engineering to go ahead and iterate new business models and products and services to meet those challenges.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. And I'll come back to you on the SME piece in a minute, actually, because I've got a question on that. And then finally from our panel, Sophie, hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Steve. Nice to see you, and great to be here. So yeah, I'm Sophie. I'm the COO and co-founder of Dsposal, who, along with our sister social enterprise, Your Disposal, is on a mission to empower people to know what happens to their waste and make better decisions around it by trying to bring transparency and accountability to the waste supply chain. So hearing Vivek speak is music to my ears, because waste is something that like all of us create, but so few people actually understand. And for most of us, when we put something in a bin, it kind of, it's gone away. We're not bothered about it anymore, and we lose all connection to it. And that kind of that loss of connection erodes our kind of sense of responsibility and our ability to enact change. And although like the Attenborough effect has kind of led to a massive public backlash against plastics, you know, and the sort of uncomfortable truth that our waste often ends up where it shouldn't. Unfortunately, like the current system, the way that it works, prevents people from really being accountable to what happens to those, you know, what I think are valuable resources that we throw away. So I've heard quite a lot today about, you know, how important ESG is now, and, you know, and how we're kind of getting better at kind of reporting on lots of this stuff, and accurate data is really important for us to be able to kind of monitor and measure and move us towards those targets. But that just doesn't exist really in the waste industry at all. It's really lacking, and it tends to be overlooked and kind of disregarded, and you know, and I think that's a real shame, because actually resource efficiency can enable us to make huge strides towards meeting the kind of carbon budgets that we need to. So we think that's something that we really need to improve on. Part of the problem is the fact that the industry is incredibly digitally immature, and that these sort of international waste supply chains are still primarily paper-based, which is astounding to most people, but it's true. And DEFRA have done a review into serious and organised crime in the industry, and found that it's, you know, this paper-based kind of nature is frequently exploited by criminals, and that actually waste crime costs our economy about £1 billion a year. So at Dsposal, what we're trying to do is sort of create software that makes it just easier to deal with waste compliance, and make it really simple for people to kind of make sure that they're not using illegal operators, and to kind of start taking accountability and responsibility of what happens to their waste when it leaves their premises. And then, you know, from your Dsposal's point of view, we're really lucky. We're currently working on a project funded by the ODI, the Open Data Institute, which is working with stakeholders from kind of across the industry to develop open data standards and open data infrastructure that we think is the kind of absolutely critical thing that we need to enable our industry to go through sort of a meaningful digital transformation that allows us to actually kind of meet the targets we need and start to really understand this waste and this resources and how they kind of flow through our economy. And so that's where we're at, and that's what we're doing at the moment. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. That's great. And yeah, I'm sure we're all reeling with the paper-based recording systems moment, flabbergasted. Just staying with you for a minute, Sophie. One thing that has come up a couple of times, and right the way back to the start with James and Graphene City, is the role that a city like Manchester can play in all of this. And you've not mentioned the circular economy explicitly, probably because it's jargon you hate. I don't know, you'll tell us in a second. But is there some sort of circular economy model that a city could develop that would support the work you do? Is there something that a city can enable to make more of this happen?
Well, yeah, so no, I'm not anti-circular economy at all. I get a bit scared when people sort of co-opt it and think it's just about sort of recycling on steroids, and so it's always a little bit kind of nervous about bringing it up, because it is about so much more than just waste and recycling, but that part of it is absolutely critical. I think it's hard to do, I think, at a city region kind of level, because these waste supply chains are international. So, but I think we can make massive strides, and we can choose to do things within, you know, within our region that make differences and that help us. And to me, the things that we can do around that is to start to really talk about waste as a resource, and to start really thinking about how can we actually reframe this and start to measure what we're throwing away, where we're throwing it away, who's got it, where's it going, what's happening to it, and can we actually stop those waste miles being so big? You know, do we need to ship it to Malaysia? Maybe not. Maybe we can try and do something with it closer to home. And can we start to actually, you know, if we can gather that data and understand it, I think that for me, that's where the power really is. And I think that that's why it's also very, very important that as a region, I think we embrace it from an open data perspective, and that this shouldn't be proprietary information that people, because it's very powerful, that people kind of hold and keep for themselves. And that's why we founded our social enterprise, because we think it's really important that the data and that infrastructure that we create shouldn't be for our own benefit. It needs to be for everybody. And so that's what I'd like to see as a region, that we start embracing that, and that people start talking about it and being willing to share that information and learn and collaborate together. So
brilliant. Thanks, Sophie. That's great. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned the Open Data Institute as well, because I'm a huge fan, and people on the call today, as well as Googling you and Dsposal, they should definitely check out the ODI, because it's inspirational stuff when it comes to data. And we've been talking about data all morning, actually, so it's just a really important thing. Vivek, can I come over to you? Because I noticed you nodding enthusiastically while Sophie was talking there. So what are your thoughts in this space?
I mean, I do agree with Sophie. waste recycling currently is a global thing. It can't be done in one place. I mean, but the problem of shipping waste abroad is CO2 footprint in transportation is becoming a problem. And with pandemic, we've seen our weakness in supply chain as well. So we need to currently even I am doing internationally some part that, but my goal, along with Graphene Center at Manchester, we want to bring the manufacturing to UK. But the thing is, it's not that easy. It's not straightforward because there are several parties in it. I mean, one is government. As you've seen from other speakers today, there are policies needed, and then there are consumers. Consumers also need to, like sustainability used to be affordable for few, but now the price of materials has gone down and it's affordable to many. So the choices we make as a consumer matters. And there is a major part innovation centers need to play because especially when it comes to advanced manufacturing, entry barriers are going higher. I mean, I was very fortunate to be part of the GEEK in the University of Manchester, but for a startup or a SMEs, entry barriers are going high. So I think going forward, innovation centers need to lead the way and show it to government, consumers, and manufacturers what's possible. Just to give an example, even if I want to characterize graphene, some of the equipment is several million pounds, and as a startup, I will never think of buying that equipment. But in Manchester, we have the world's best material research centers available already. So we do have the tools, but I think innovation centers need to lead the way and show us how it can be done.
Thanks, Vivek. Just so on that, and then Chris, I'm going to come to you in a moment around what all of this means for SMEs in Greater Manchester and how can they be in on this. But staying with you for a moment, Vivek. So you're spinning out of the University of Manchester, which is, that's great news for all the metrics that universities have in play around, what's our innovation impact and all that sort of stuff. Two questions really. I think it'd be, for those on the call today who don't know what university-based innovation looks like, it'd be really interesting to know what your journey looks like. Where is Space Blue headed? What's the business plan? And how has that happened? I'm sure it'd be really fascinating for us to hear a bit more about that. But then also, is there a way for existing SMEs to spin in to the Innovation Centre? If we're not already imbued in the University of Manchester, is there people with an idea out there to actually access some of the equipment and opportunities that you're talking about?
Yeah. First, I will come to my journey. I mean, I was fortunate to be as part of university, and I did have access to capabilities in the Graphene Center. So that did accelerate the business. And I'm a material scientist, so when it comes to startups, it's really difficult to have the business side. The CEO of the Graphene Center, James Baker, he was quite business switched on person, and he helped me guide through many business activities. I mean, what type of products I need to develop. So we've developed some minimum viable products, and it's sold out fast. And one thing I was fortunate is any startup, it's not just me, there is fundings available like Bridge the Gap ERDF fundings. Like your second part of the questions, any startup in Manchester, Greater Manchester, can access this funding to access the university facilities. And to be honest, they're very friendly people. I mean, but sometimes when people think big university, they don't want to contact them thinking, oh, they may not entertain small companies, but it's not true. I mean, I've seen many small companies benefiting from ERDF Bridge the Gap fundings. I mean, long term, my plan is we want to create a fully circular manufacturing facility in Manchester, because an example, if you want to go to Moon, we want to use the resources in Moon to create something. So for Manchester, there are a lot of resources. I mean, I call resources a waste, and waste is a resource. We need to use it and create a fully circular manufacturing facility in Manchester. The thing is, I want to also, there's a good side, but some challenges I'm facing is in the UK. The UK is really good in fundamental research, but when it comes to commercialization, there is a gap. I mean, there is less investment funding from private firms available for small scale and medium scale companies. I got a lot of investors, but most of the big investment offers are coming from internationally, from Israel, from Canada. So we need UK investors to put money into small companies as well.
Great. Well, that's a very clear call to action for everybody on the Zoom today. Invest now, avoid disappointment. And unless I'm mistaken, you just said that you were organising a moonshot, which is pretty epic. Chris, can I come to you from Manchester Met Business School? I mean, and let's not forget, this is a pro-Manchester session. So we're in a very capitalist zone right now. We want to know how all of this becomes a business that can make us money and boost the economy. Green innovation, how do businesses make this actually happen?
Well, kind of leading on from what Vivek said there, I think there's some great opportunities for Greater Manchester-based SMEs to get involved. And, you know, an example would be what we've done over the past 3 years, which is a project which is closing, where we've worked with 80 businesses to introduce them to fuel cell technology. But Vivek's absolutely right. You know, the Graphene Centre has got an ERDF project which will bring businesses in and expose them to the expertise and the technical equipment of graphene. We've got another one which is running at the minute, which is looking at using recycled plastics with additive manufacturing. So, you know, one of the things about universities, we're not always great at promoting what we're doing. So one of the things that, you know, I'd suggest everyone do if they're interested in this business day is Google us and have a look at what we're doing. We are open for business. We do want SMEs to come in and talk to us, because really what this is about, and, you know, there's a reason why we run our tech transfer programs out of the business school. It's about commerciality. It's about getting these ideas out of the lab and into businesses and helping these businesses thrive on the back of it. So, you know, it's not only ourselves at Manchester Met, it's the University of Salford, it's the University of Manchester. There's some really, really good activity going on there. And I really would encourage anyone that's interested in this space of eco-innovation to get in touch with us and see what we're doing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Sophie, you posted something in the chat. Do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, just to say that so the Sustainable Materials Innovation Hub, which has recently opened at the Henry Voice Institute, is also providing support to Greater Manchester SMEs, of which we're one. And so you can get various different types of kind of support and access in terms of from sort of advice and kind of, you know, things like that, but right through to if you want them to help you develop some snazzy new polymers and stuff, which is way outside of my remit, then they're doing things like that as well. So just to say, get in touch. They've been really helpful and useful for us. So it's a great resource to have there.
And Sophie, one with you. I mean, we heard a little bit about Vivek's journey, and, you know, like you, I'm a founder of a business myself. So what's your journey been like? What made you, what was right at the start led you to start Dsposal? What was it that sparked that?
How long have you got? My background is in supply chains, and my co-founder Tom and my partner, his background is mixed, but a lot in the waste industry. And in 2015, we quit our jobs and went cycle touring around North America. And while we were pedaling and I was enjoying myself, he was thinking about how to solve the problems of his former job, and came up with this idea of trying to create a hub that sat between both waste producers and waste companies, because there's a lot of transactions going between the two, but there's nothing that really kind of connects and makes that easier for people. And so that's how the kind of the spark of the idea came. And then it's just been a long old slog since then, if I'm honest. But actually things, you know, this past year has been surprisingly good for us. And I think in some ways, the pandemic has given, you know, people who are still in business and kind of operating, has given them sort of breathing space in some ways to kind of think strategically and try and think about how tech can actually support their operations and how that can make a difference. And so for us, it's been quite a remarkable year, actually. And we've seen a lot of growth and a lot of people kind of open to kind of implementing tech that they haven't been previously. So I'm really hopeful that actually this horrible thing that's happened to us all is the sort of start of a new kind of way of doing business and allowing us to kind of reevaluate how we do things and think about better ways forward. So yeah, that's the very succinct version.
I know, it's great. Thanks, Sophie, brilliant. And I mean, it's a delicate one, isn't it? You don't want to make every conversation about COVID. So I completely sympathize, depressing, but the fact that you've noticed almost there's this space being created for us to all think differently, I think is what you're picking up on. Chris Taylor at MMU Business School, I mean, have you noticed a a change this year? Are people looking at innovation differently?
It's just been a crazy year all around, really. I think from our perspective, it's been quite difficult because of the need to shut a lot of our facilities. So a lot of our conversations have changed with businesses. What we always say, though, is that, you know, the world is always changing. There's always opportunities to innovate. You just need to be, you know, looking out there for those opportunities. And I think one of the things that we always try and do is support businesses from perspective is that, you know, innovation isn't a mystery. You know, it's you know, most businesses should adopt a process for innovation in the same way that you'd adopt a process to manage your finances. You know, it's something that you should be continually looking as a business to doing, because the world's always changing. COVID is a particular step change, you know, and it's caused some particular challenges. But the world's always changing, and particularly from an eco perspective, we know that energy use is going to change. We know that you know, behaviour around vehicles is going to change. There's opportunities for SMEs within that to look at the opportunities and to iterate new business models on the back of it. So yeah, I think there's been a huge change. We've not necessarily seen a huge amount of it through our projects, but you know, there is opportunity for businesses to you know, look into that and look at opportunities.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. I'm going to finish up with you, Vivek, and it's a flippant question. I apologise in advance, but you are in the Graphene and Innovation Centre, the Geek. We call it the Geek, don't we? So, geeky question.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all want to know: is it like a crazy version of Big Bang Theory, but with graphene? They're just like people innovating all around you. What's the buzz over there at the Graphene Centre?
It is. I mean, I mean, it is fun. I mean, the innovation, we see it as fun. You know, the good thing is there are a lot of people with a lot of ideas, so you get to hear so many things happening all the time. I mean, just to give an example, I was not the first one to use graphene and rubber. There were many other companies. An example, there was a shoe company that did it before me, but then, but I use it in waste tire recycling. So you get plenty, you know, when you talk with many ideas and listen to many things, you can use it for something else. You know, I wouldn't do shoes, but I can use it to recycle waste tire. I mean, one thing I wanted to point out is, you know, sustainable products. When you want to create a truly sustainable product, we want to create something that lasts longer. I mean, an example, a fast fashion company saying, I will recycle end of life of a t-shirt, which can only be used one time. Anything when enter a supply chain for recycling, it creates CO2. So graphene extend the life of the product. So we can reduce the CO2 in that way. I mean, so we get to talk to a lot of people. So we get the ideas in the Graphene Center. It helps.
I'm going to wrap us up there, Vivek. That's perfect finish to this panel. Again, a big virtual round of applause to all of you. Thanks ever so much for being with us. And now I'm going to hand over for the next, which picks up perfectly from that in terms of protecting and financing innovation. My colleague Sambu, the CEO of Pro Manchester, is going to take over from me to chair the next session. And a special announcement, it's her birthday today. So big happy birthday, Sam, and I'm handing over to you.
Thank you, Steve. It is my birthday, and thank you for the well wishes. It's the big 4-0. It's a big one today. Celebrations will be definitely different this time round as we're all in lockdown, but never mind. That's okay. And I'm really chuffed to be spending it with all of you lot and having this conversation today because it's of the utmost importance. As Steve has already said, we are going to be talking about today the finance and protection element of these emerging technologies and how important it is to have the ecosystem and the support system in and around Greater Manchester to achieve the grand ambitions of the 2038 goals that we have set for us. So this morning I'm going to be joined by James Painter from Palatine, a private equity firm, Andrew Noone from Anthesis, they are a sustainability consultancy, and Ian Davies from Appleyard who are IP lawyers and consultants. So I think first and foremost, that was a quick introduction to them, but I will let them introduce themselves more formally and in a bit more detail. So James, if I can hand over to you, do you want to just talk a little about you and Palatine?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. I'm James Painter. I'm an investment director at Palatine Private Equity. For those of you that don't know Palatine, we're a mid-market private equity fund focused on investing 5 to 30 million in regional businesses. We were the first mid-market private equity house to be headquartered in Manchester. And we're currently investing from 2 funds at the moment, a buyout fund and an impact fund. And I'll maybe come on to the impact fund a little bit later. Throughout Palatine, we've always placed a strong focus on environmental and social governance. And as a result of this, we decided to raise the UK's first returns-focused impact fund, looking at businesses that can make a positive environmental or social difference. Just to give you a bit of a flavour in terms of my role, as a director in the investment team, I'm responsible for transacting the investments that we make. And I also sit on the board of the portfolio companies of those deals, helping those businesses to grow ultimately until we would exit as an investor.
Brilliant, thanks James. And as you say, we're going to go into a bit more detail about that impact fund a little bit later on. But before we do that, Andrew, would you like to perhaps just give us a sort of top level introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure, and happy birthday, Sam.
Thank you.
Good morning everybody. So my name's Andrew Noone. I work for Anthesis, as Sam said, which is a sustainability consulting firm, and really our purpose is to activate sustainability for our clients. So we take clients on a kind of activator journey to try and make sustainability and ESG much more mainstream in businesses, because I think there's a perception that historically sustainability and ESG has been a bit of an add-on, whereas now we see it much more mainstream and central to the kind of purpose and commercial returns that organizations make. So I know it's a green tech conference. We also kind of have a digital practice within our consulting firm, because we believe that digital and software is one of the key kind of enablers to scale the kind of change that we need to see across the planet. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks Andrew. And last but certainly not least, Ian, would you like to come in and talk to us a little bit more about you and your role at Appleyard Lease?
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Sam, and happy birthday.
Thank
I had
you.
my big 5-0 during lockdown, so I can sympathise on the lack of a birthday party. So it's sad. So my name's Ian Davies. I'm a partner at Appleyard Lease. We're a full-service patent and trademark law firm based in, well, our biggest office is in Manchester, but we've got offices in Leeds and Halifax and Cambridge as well. So we cover the whole UK, Europe and beyond. So our focus is really helping our clients protect their investment in their innovation. So whether that's a technical invention, whether that's in the chemical field, mechanical, electronic, whatever it might be, it could be carbon capture, improved energy generation, reducing our landfill, whatever it might be that has a kind of any kind of green slant to it, we can help that from a technology point of view. So if you've invented a new system, a new device, we can help you to secure some monopoly protection for that to keep your competitors at bay. That will give you the option to either just preserve that technology for yourself, to license it, to sell it, to fund more innovation. There's a whole range of options you have once you've actually got that protection in place. But I think the key thing for people who aren't familiar with patents in particular, the most important thing you can remember is that don't disclose your invention to anybody until you sought advice from a patent attorney. It may be that once you disclose the invention, you then can't get protection for it. So you could be giving away the crown jewels without even realizing it. So if people learn nothing else but that one thing, then that would be a valuable lesson, I think. Aside from patents, we can help with branding, with trademarks, for designs, for the way that things look, with copyright, if you're producing written material and so on, code. Those are all things that we can help you capitalize on your innovation.
Brilliant, thank you, Ian. And I think, I think one of my sort of wrap-up questions is going to be kind of big key takeaways, really. And I think maybe that don't disclose one is up there at the top of that. Before I move on to ask some questions, I've got a number of questions to ask our panel, but I would really like to encourage our audience and attendees to get involved in this conversation as well, if you like. So please, pop your questions in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hands, etc., and then we can bring you into that conversation. Then please do. It would be nice to have some input from you too. My starting question, and Andrew, I'm gonna fire this one at you. It won't come as a complete surprise because we have discussed all these things previously. But as we've said, Manchester has set a much higher target than the national one, to go 12 years ahead of everybody else with regards to our carbon zero target. So I suppose maybe I just want to get your opinion on what do you think it is about Manchester? Why is that achievable for Manchester outside, but maybe above everybody else?
Yeah, I think you know, when Andy Burnham mentioned this as the commitment for the kind of citywide region, I think there was quite a lot of surprise, I think, from maybe other regions, other cities, given that the UK set its target at 2050. But you know, this rapid change, it has an economic dimension to it. So the sooner we can get to a place of carbon neutrality, the less it will cost the city region in the longer term. So every year that we're ahead, then every year that is money that is saved and should attract investment into the city region, because you know, we see some headwinds coming around internal carbon tax, that companies would have to account for an internal cost of carbon within their business, which could be legislated in the future. So if Manchester and the city region is already at a carbon neutral place well in advance of where the UK says it's going to be, that should potentially pull investment and attract people to come and set up in Manchester. And you know, given Manchester's one of, well, the largest kind of tech cluster outside of London, then that should be a pretty good opportunity over that window between now and 2038 to get to that point. I think the other thing to mention is that it will also start to pull investors into looking at companies who want to set up in Manchester. So we're already seeing, and I know ESG and environmental social governance has already been mentioned in previous discussions, but you know, there is investors are definitely waking up to this. This month, BlackRock, Schroders, Aviva have all written letters to their CEOs and boards to ask them that, you know, financing will be contingent on hitting a series of improvement requirements around ESG. So back to the point about Manchester, clearly if we're already aligning against hitting some of those requirements and being at a carbon neutral citywide region by 2038, I can only see the kind of positives for the whole region, really, in terms of growth in tech, but also growth in other sectors that support tech.
Brilliant, thank you. And apologies, that was my doorbell that went off in the middle of that, so thank God it didn't throw you off too much. Thank you, Andrew. And there's an awful lot of the talk there around the investment piece. So I think that's probably a nice kind of segue into coming over to James, really, to perhaps maybe kind of build a little bit from that and talking about attracting that investment into the city.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, just to give you the highlights on our impact fund. Obviously, we attract investment from large overseas investors, high net worth investors. You know, really broad range, and I think we're seeing exactly that. What Andrew's saying in terms of investors have woken up to it, and that they are looking at businesses when they're looking at private equity in particular. They're not just looking at businesses that that can generate great returns. They are looking at businesses that can show what they're demonstrating from an ESG perspective, and that was really why we raised the impact fund 3-4 years ago, because we believe that both of that, you can have both of those. You can have a great business and you can have strong ESG credentials, and if you have strong ESG credentials, it should make it a better business. So we raised that probably 3 years ago. Really, businesses that can make a really positive environmental or social difference is where we're looking to focus. And I guess we feel in terms of what we can bring to the party, and how we can help green tech businesses, there's a really positive area that we can bring from both capital and commercial guidance. And capital is one thing, but we've been there, worked with hundreds of businesses and been through the same kind of growing pains that a lot of businesses go through to scale sustainably. So yeah, that's the impact fund. Happy to kind of answer any questions you've got on it. You're on mute, Sam.
classic. Sorry, I'm trying to avoid the doorbell, trying to interrupt anybody again. And there we go. So I suppose, you know, obviously today is very much about sort of Manchester and Manchester to businesses. So perhaps, you know, talking a little bit more about specifically about that impact fund that you have and how that can help aid the growth of businesses in and around the region.
Yeah, of course. So I think there's probably three areas where you know, where we come in, where we can help. The first is around shareholder alignment. Actually, it maybe sounds quite simple, but you know, a lot of businesses have very different shareholder structures, have different aims and different goals. I guess one thing private equity enables is there to be one goal for a business, which is to make it a successful business. So you know, private equity enables those businesses to either, you know, to cash out certain shareholders who aren't aligned with the values of that business, or equally allows some shareholders to de-risk their investment. So that's quite an important one. You know, the second one's capital. If a business is looking to go into new markets, you know, look at launching new products, that it's going to need investment, and that's one of the key bottlenecks in, you know, probably achieving, you know, what we want to achieve here. You know, one area where we come in, you know, we can provide growth capital for those areas, but we do a lot of work with making acquisitions. So businesses need some firepower to go and make acquisitions, to expand into new geographies. That's something we've got a big track record of. I think we've made 150 acquisitions in our portfolio of about 30 businesses. So you know, we've got a big track record of that. And then, as I say, the last one's guidance. You know, I think we're not sector experts at Palatine. We understand the sector, but we're very much about backing management teams. What we have seen though is a lot of similar trends across, you know, the businesses that we've worked with, and what you need in order to scale sustainably in this market. So they're the three areas that I'd say we can add value.
Great, thank you. And I suppose that last point again, it links quite nicely into the work that James is doing with Anthesis and the consultancy, and helping businesses on that journey. Talk to us perhaps, maybe Andrew, a little bit about sort of how that journey's perhaps changed, and how, you know, the ESG has become much more at the forefront of businesses, investors, consumers, you know, spending and buying habits.
Yeah, and I think, you know, James has touched nicely on some of the trends, but you know, I think we look at some of the drivers in the market, you know, rapid climate change, inclusivity, diversity agenda, and a greater sense that organizations need to move faster. There's a pace thing here. You know, we're in what the UN calls a decisive decade, which is basically 10 years to essentially crack the most harmful elements of climate change. So, you know, to James's point, if they're taking on a business into the fund, then the last thing is that it comes out of the fund, say halfway through the decade, sorry, and that there's no enterprise value, or they haven't thought about some of these ESG factors that means there's value erosion rather than creating value. And I think that pace of change, you know, back to the Manchester part, I think that's a clear example where Manchester's generated agency on change by throwing down the challenge to be carbon neutral city region by 2038. But, you know, I think there's investor pressure, which I mentioned before, but there's also now much more quantitative analysis going on by investors on quantifying ESG. You know, sustainability has long been a bit esoteric, a bit, or, you know, do we really feel they're doing this? Whereas now, you know, there's ESG ratings agencies, there's ranking agencies, there's ESG reports being generated by investors on companies to see how viable investments are. And, you know, increasingly, as James has kind of alluded to, ESG is a bit of a proxy for kind of good management of businesses. You know, tech businesses, clearly there's issues around cloud computing and managing the carbon impacts associated with the cloud. There's, you know, if you're an investor looking to acquire a a tech business, actually maybe the tech business is looking at the acquirer and saying, actually they don't represent us, they're not as diverse, or they don't have enough diversity for us to be to look at them as an investor. So I think there's a whole load of top-down investor pressure that's coming. I also think consumers and the way sustainable investments going, there's a clear demographic here of consumers want to buy with purpose. They want to be associated with brands that display this purpose, show the impact, and stand behind it. And there's various ways we help, I suppose, companies think about attracting the kind of investments that James and other private equity firms that we work for might be looking for. And I think one is to look at your kind of material ESG risks and get plans in place for those. I think that's a big number one. Number two is that what ESG impacts you are having, how do you tell that story, and how do you look at that kind of tech innovation? How do you really talk about the brand story associated with the kind of change and the difference you're making? And I suppose third is, which I'm sure there's lots of businesses on this call who are probably going, yeah, we're not very good at that, is communicating and reporting on the progress that you've made around ESG, so that when investors start to poke around and look at your company, it's all visible on the website. There might be a standalone ESG report or a section that talks about what you're doing and what your purpose is and how to tell that story. So yeah, I think it's both top down and bottom up in terms of investors pushing down and consumers obviously wanting to associate with companies and businesses that meet their kind of purpose goals in the future.
This is probably quite a good opportunity to maybe plug the work that you do. I mean, how important is it that people seek the professional advice from the likes of your kind of Anthesis and our other professional advisors who I'm going to go on the panel as well, that I'm going to come to and talk to? How important is that really?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this space about 20 years, and I would say it's been very incremental. Over the last, say, 17 years or so, it's been carbon footprinting, looking at products, looking at climate change, whereas now there's been a massive in the last 2 years there's been a sort of exponential change, Sam, in terms of the amount of clients that are requesting our support, be it to I heard Sophie mention earlier, whether it's dealing with plastics, whether it's dealing with regulatory challenges to do with climate change, whether it's setting science-based targets so that companies are aligned with the Paris Accord to be 1.5 degrees. We're in a very buoyant market, and it requires exponential change, and I guess that's a big point to get across to people is, you need to go big on this, and you need to tell that story, and you need to show that you've kind of defined your materiality in terms of what the risk is you're managing, but also what your upside is, so that you can really be a kind of a viable investment and attract investment into the future. So yeah, we're not quiet, Sam, put it that way. We're certainly very busy in this kind of decisive decade, as I say.
No, that's good. That's good to hear. Definitely, I think we all want to hear that people are busy at this particular time, and we might touch on COVID if we've got time, but we might not. But that's just. But just moving on to Ian actually, and that element of risk. So everything that you do is about mitigating against that risk, isn't it? So perhaps you kind of talk to us a little bit about some of the work that you do and the importance of protecting your business from the absolute outset.
Sure, I guess that there's two sides to looking at IP, and I'll concentrate on patents particularly because it deals with the technical side of things. As I mentioned, we do sort of trademarks and so on as well. But from a technical point of view in protecting innovation, there's two sides to it really. You want to make sure that the innovation that you've done as an organisation is protected so that you can monopolise that and prevent other people from stealing your ideas. And the flip side of that is, of course, other people have protection that might stop you doing what you want to do. So we always work very closely with clients to try and make sure that they capitalise on their own innovation. To give them that flexibility, they can then choose to sell that technology, license it, or just preserve it for their own use. but also to make sure they don't fall foul of somebody else's technology if they have patents in place. So they're sort of two sides of the same coin, and that they can be of different importances depending on what stage you are in your sort of product life cycle. If you're starting out and you've got no sort of real physical assets, then there's no sales yet, all you've got is your R&D investment, it's very important to capitalize on that and file patent applications to protect your investment. You might come at this from the point of view, particularly in this sector, and say, well, I'm doing good work here. I want the world to know about what I'm doing. I've developed something fantastic that will have an impact on the global climate crisis. I want people to use this freely, and that's a perfectly noble, rational thing to do. But if you give away your technology, you're cutting off an income stream potentially to fund more research that could take you even further down the line. So it's the thing that people might want to do, and there are plenty of examples of cases where that's been done. But you need to go into that with your eyes open and realize that can have really very serious negative consequences. So when you go to someone like James and try and get investment in your business, they'll look at your asset sheet and say, well, you've given away all the technology you had. Why have you done that? Whereas for the sake of a relatively small investment in patents, you can really bolster that and make yourself look much more attractive to potential investors. So that's a key thing, as I mentioned at the start, really, that I'd encourage people to look at that, because it's a very, very important thing to do. And it's often overlooked in the rush to get things to market, in the rush to try and get other investors on board or third parties to contribute. You can often end up revealing too much about your technology before you've got any protection in place. But once you have got that protection in place, we can help you sort of steer that through the process. You mentioned about getting professional advice. I mean, you can file patent applications yourself, but in the same way that you probably wouldn't do the conveyancing on your house purchase or conduct your own divorce or something, you're not likely to want to do that. It's a very heavily legal process, and there's plenty of pitfalls if you don't know what you're doing. So hopefully we can put you in the right position to get the best way through that maze, and at the end of it end up with some granted patents that can really bolster your commercial position.
Brilliant, thank you. I think it's really, really interesting, because you've all sort of talked about, and I touched on it at the very beginning, but I kind of maybe want to just elaborate very quickly before we run to an end, because I know we are running out of time. But you've talked about, actually the importance and how each of your independent work, actually has an impact within each other. So part of that ecosystem. So Manchester obviously has the largest financial and professional services sector outside of London. So James, perhaps I just want to talk to you about that relationship, and how important is that for actually, one, for us, heading towards these grand ambitions and the goal of 2038, and that sort of close-knit community. I think that's the real selling point for Manchester. But I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's I think it's crucial, really. So I think ultimately businesses need, if they're going to scale quickly and sustainably, they're going to need capital, and they're going to need guidance, and that's the only way they're going to scale. So from my perspective, especially on the green tech side, it's even more important that all of the stakeholders, so whether that's advisors, consultants, entrepreneurs, policymakers, kind of work together and use their network. And that what you touched earlier around kind of key takeaways, but I think that is a key one about using the network you've got, because there's a really good one in Manchester.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and Ian made the point, is that some of this stuff you could go out there and you could do it on your own, but it's actually but using the professional advisory network means that you've actually got people who can then refer and make that growth, that development much smoother, hopefully. We are unfortunately massively out of time, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to wrap it up here. But I would like to say, obviously, a huge thank you to Ian, James, Andrew, participating today. So if anyone's got any further questions, pop them in the chat, and we'll make sure that they get to our panelists so that they can come back and hopefully answer any queries that you might have. Thank you very much.